Hey guys, Ginger here. Welcome to another episode of Fighting the Void. I am going to just be talking about some random things this particular episode. I don't know how long or short it will be, so bear with me. We're just going to kind of riff a little bit off the cuff here and see what happens. First, I know I'm a couple minutes early. It's not yet 2 a.m. Monday morning, but it doesn't matter because most of the viewers of this channel are sleeping right now, like, people that are sane, of which I assume there's a few of you out there. I don't know. The numbers seem to be dropping dramatically. So first thing to talk about, I should probably follow up a couple of things from my spiritual journey episode from last week, because I realized after the fact there were a couple things that I didn't really elaborate on that I meant to, that I even said during the episode that I would. First and foremost, how did I get out of porn? I did, and I actually haven't looked at it. I haven't gone looking out at any pornographic imagery in many, many years now. Thank goodness. Literally, thank God for that. That came about rather suddenly. My wife and I, we were on vacation. We weren't married yet. So my at the time girlfriend, we were on vacation in Colorado visiting her sister, and I forget the conversation that led up to it, but it did. Finally, I was like, and of course, the fact that I was into porn and everything at the time was bothering me a lot. It was really, it was eating away at my conscience. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't get the willpower to just break out of it on my own. So I finally confided in my at the time girlfriend that I was into that, and it upset her a lot. It was dramatic. I mean, she, without going into too many details, she treated exactly like I was cheating on her, because it's about this far removed from it. It's not that different. And that, seeing her reaction is what finally helped me finally get over the hump, I guess. Because I had tried praying and setting myself certain goals and this, that, the other thing, and just nothing was working. It was almost like I needed to see that trauma that was causing, to be able to truly recognize the seriousness of what I was doing and break away from it. And I went and I talked to one of the pastors at the church we were going to at the time, who also had a psychology degree or psychiatry, whichever one doesn't give you pills. That's the one I was talking to. And went and visited him a few times, not a lot, just talking through some stuff. It's like, what was I into, why was I into it, so on and so forth. And just between that and knowing how much it hurt my wife, helped me get over the fact that I was it just helped me get over that fact that I was into it, and I never looked back since. Fortunately, I have been porn free for years, thank goodness. And anyway, I just wanted to quickly go over that. And like I said, it's been, how long has it been now? Well, we've been married almost 17 years, so it's been longer than that, which is pretty good. But is it a struggle from time to time? Yeah, it is. But in any case, you may or may not need more help than that to get out of it. If you do need more help, go get it. And I say my goodness, I actually have a live viewer, 2 a.m. Monday morning. Skull, whoever you are out there. And in any case, other thing I wanted to pick up on, I really felt like I glossed over a lot of some of the things I went with joining the Catholic Church, and I just really glossed over it. I made it seem like I didn't really have too many issues one way or another, but I did. Most of them had to do with authority. The Pope's role, the priest's role. Let's see what else. The Eucharist was just hard for me to wrap my head around. Like I didn't understand it at all. You're telling me the priest says some words, and this becomes the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. Okay, so how does that work? So I mean, that took a lot of study really to see if, okay, really getting into John 6 for one. That's the bread of life discourse for those who don't know. That's when he actually tells a whole group of people that unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life within you. That's the primary thing where the whole doctrine of the Eucharist comes from. Then of course you have the Last Supper. This is my body, this is my blood. Actual words that Jesus himself actually spoke. And he was certainly given to using hyperbole as a tool from time to time, but this is not one of those cases, because the whole language, the whole tone of it is very literal, because it's very clear that the whole group of people listening to him, they don't get what he's saying, or at least they're very offended by it, because it's either not making sense to them, or they're extremely scandalized. Like, you're telling us to like eat parts of your body? How's that going to work out, buddy? They didn't get it, and Jesus didn't feel like the need to explain it in any greater detail to them. And even when he turned to the apostles who didn't leave, he was like, so what are you going to do? Turns to them and is like, so what? You going to leave like them? And Peter, speaking first as he normally does, was all, you know what? And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. He's like, I don't know what you're saying, but if you don't have the truth, I don't know who else does. So I'll wait and hope I understand. Hope I can accept what it is that you're teaching right now. Even more to the point, Jesus doesn't just use the word for eat. He uses a word that could be better described as gnaw. Like, just really get in, like you would with a piece of beef jerky. You know, like just really, really going after it. And he's like emphasizing that, no, I really mean get in there, chew it down. But it's not just, he uses graphic phrasing to describe this. Phrasing that is guaranteed to upset a Jewish sensibility. Because, as you may or may not know, they had strict provisions against, one, the kind of food they could eat, but very strict provisions against drinking the blood of the animals. And he's flat out saying, it's like, no, not just a pig. No. Mine. So yeah, getting over that was a big hurdle. But again, getting into John 6, getting into the Last Supper, of course, St. Paul in one of his letters to the Corinthians, talking about if you eat and drink unworthily, you eat and drink condemnation on yourself. Thought that he was getting awfully worked up about a symbol. So between those things and, of course, getting some good explanations, some good apologetics on the whole subject, really brought that down to earth for me. One of the best ones that you could possibly get is actually by Scott Hahn, The Lamb's Supper. If you don't have that book, I recommend tracking it down. It really goes over the Mass really well. It goes over the apologetics of the Eucharist and also ties it into Revelation, which, trust me, it's interesting at the very least. I don't know if I completely subscribe to everything that Dr. Hahn is saying in there, but he presents a lot of interesting points, a lot of interesting arguments, to say the very least. And it's well worth a read. It's a short read. It's like most of his books, it's in the neighborhood of 200 pages, probably a little bit under. So go check it out. And, there were, gosh, it's hard to remember everything that I had a hard time with. And of course, there were various historical elements too, like the Crusades and the Inquisition, and so on and so forth. Like a stigma that gets attached to the Catholic Church an awful lot. But a little bit of historical knowledge quickly dispelled all of those. Crusades. Oh, you mean Christian Europe sat and got its butt kicked by the Muslim hordes for about 400 years before finally mounting a defense. And it was overall a fairly unsuccessful defense. I don't know if you've noticed, but the North Africa and the Middle East still aren't terribly Christian. They were before the Muslims showed up. And they took those areas over and started punishing Christians as second-class citizens, which obvious. And I don't want to get into it too much, but yes, Christians did that to other people as well in Europe. That's a perfectly fair point. Point is, we were there first, so there. And Oh, goodness gracious. The Inquisitions found out they weren't nearly as bad as many people believe they were. In fact, a lot of modern jurisprudence, like having multiple witnesses and everything, even if I remember correctly, I'd have to double check this, but I think like even the concept of jury trials basically comes from the Inquisitions. And or maybe it came from Rome and they were following that, in which case still they were carrying forward good jurisprudence that we still use today. People will point to the fact that you weren't allowed to face your accuser. As a matter of fact, when the Inquisitions first started, you were in fact allowed to face your accuser. That was a requirement. However, the accusers started to get retaliated against. You know, somebody would be being held, investigated for heresy or whatever, or they'd get let go, and the accuser would suffer the wrath, essentially. So, to protect the accuser from retaliation, they stopped. You know, they basically stopped with that. They stopped allowing the accused to face the accuser. You can decide on your own whether or not that was a good call, but at the time you can kind of understand it at the very least. It made sense, especially in the light of the fact that the vast majority, I don't know the exact numbers, but trust me, it's way more than half of cases were dismissed. They're like, nope, not even enough evidence to take this to trial. Boom, out. Get out of here with your silly accusation. Matilda over there isn't a witch. Get over it. Or if she is, you're going to have to do better than just saying, I think she's a witch. Yeah, believe it or not, that is the case. The Inquisitors were not all wizened old white men just hoping to be able to burn somebody at the stake. Not a thing. Not a thing at all. Some other authors I would recommend, if you're all curious about the Catholic Church, check out Karl Keating. He's got a lot of things. He's got a lot of just basic apologetics works. Dr. Hahn, he brings a lot of high-level theology down to a very, very accessible level. If you can, check out Our Father's Plan. It's a video series that Dr. Hahn did with Jeff Cavins, who was another former Protestant pastor, convert to Catholicism, and they kind of walk you through the whole Bible, showing the whole story of salvation. It's dry. It's so dry, but if slog through it, work through it, it's very, very, very rewarding if you're willing to put in the work. There's other versions of it too, like the Great Bible Timeline Adventure thing. That's just Cavins, and there's something called T3, which is something that's more geared towards teenagers. But I prefer diving in head first, both feet, all of that stuff. And I prefer like the full thing. Give me the fire hose sort of approach. Monsignor Ronald Knox, definitely check him out. G.K. Chesterton, very much check him out. His books Heretics and Orthodoxy, fantastic books. Heretics isn't really a work about it's not an apologetics work. It's more think of them as profiles of some of the most famous literary figures of the late 19th, early 20th century. Because Chesterton was friends with all of them. H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw, Rudyard Kipling, and a lot more. Chesterton was friends with all of these guys. And they disagreed on almost everything. It's fantastic. And Chesterton kind of went through and, why are all of these people wrong? And it's a really good read. Definitely check it out. Orthodoxy is his response to the question made by his friends who are like, okay, buddy, well, what do you believe? Orthodoxy is more of an apologetics work, and it's fantastic. It's amazing, and it's incredibly pro-Catholic, but it was written years, like more than a decade before he actually became Catholic. Yeah, go figure. Part of that's because the Anglicans were a lot closer to the Catholic Church back then. But for Chesterton, that's still a huge leap, because at one point, he was like a socialist Unitarian. Yeah, literally a thing. In fact, Chesterton's distributism, you could criticize it as being perhaps having too much in common with socialism, except that he's very adamant that he wants no force used when it comes to actually establishing a distributist society. And one of these days, I'll have to do a whole episode going into what distributism is, what it isn't, its history, its goals, so on and so forth. That would be fascinating, actually, because I could definitely do with a little bit more delving back into it myself, just because it's fun. Other ones, obviously, C.S. Lewis is fantastic. He's a great bridge. He's a very Catholic-friendly Protestant, and he is still Protestant, definitely, but there's a lot in common there. There's a lot of common ground. Joseph Pierce, recommend him. He does a lot of biographies on literary figures, Shakespeare, Tolkien, Oscar Wilde, those types of people. He's a very good writer, and you definitely benefit from reading him. Hilaire Belloc, can't believe I didn't mention him along with Chesterton, because they were like best buds. He's got one story about his pilgrimage to Rome called The Path to Rome, oddly enough. A lot of people love that book. I read it. I wasn't as into it, but still, it was a good book. And he does a lot of historical and apologetics works himself, including on Marie Antoinette, Napoleon, and a whole bunch of others. Peter Kreeft, Catholic philosopher. He taught at Boston College. He's still alive. He's older than the hills at this point, but he's a really cool guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him in person. He does a lot of dialogue books, actually. He's done all, like, so-and-so meets... Socrates meets so-and-so. Socrates meets Marx. Socrates meets Jesus. Socrates meets Kierkegaard. So on and so forth. If you want something that's going to give you a good rundown of the thought of a lot of these different people and a good probing of their philosophies, I strongly recommend those books. I've read a handful of them, and they're excellent. In fact, Kreeft is a master of dialogue. There's one book he did between Heaven and Hell. It's an imaginative dialogue between C.S. Lewis, Aldous Huxley, and John F. Kennedy, who all, as it happens, died on the same day. So that's a heck of a great book. By all means, read it. It's fantastic. And he does some more strictly apologetics work as well. Yes or No is one. He's got a couple of books on St. Thomas Aquinas, and he's very accessible. Like that, he and Dr. Hahn might be the best I can think of for, at least that I've read personally, for a modern audience, in terms of being able to take high-level ideas and breaking them down so that the average person can understand them. They're both masters of it. In fact, if I could recommend anything, start with those two, more than anyone else that I could possibly recommend. I love Chesterton, but his writing style is hard for some. Not that it's overly heady, but he winds around a lot, and he writes a lot with using the concept of paradox, two things that are seemingly contradictory, but they fit together and meet in the middle, much like the cross, as Chesterton himself points out. Anyway, I think that's more than enough recommendations for the moment, because there are any number of others. I could literally spend 3 or 4 episodes just going through different Catholic and Catholic-friendly authors that I would recommend, and why you should read them, and what's so great about them. But I'm not going to do that right now. One other thing I specifically mentioned I want to talk about was John Boyega. Yeah, shifting gears a little bit. I'm sorry. Deal with it. John Boyega, he seems to have gone a little bit off the rails since the release of Rise of Skywalker. It is interesting sometimes to watch these actors when they start to spout off when they know they're free of a contract. Chris Evans started to do it a little bit just before Endgame came out. Like, he knew he was done playing Captain America, so he didn't have to portray an image anymore, and all of a sudden he started speaking a lot of very, very lefty talking points, which should have surprised no one, of course. And same with Boyega. It's just an interesting phenomenon. Anyway, Boyega has been going very, very SJW, very wokish, whining about Disney and how they gave all the nuanced stories to the white actors. and well, technically true. And he is being a bit of a whiny prick about the whole thing. However, he does have a point, especially when it comes to his own character Finn. And especially since it looked like by Force Awakens, there was a lot of hope for Finn. He looked like a potentially very interesting character, potentially Force sensitive, and he threw down and held his own a little bit with Kylo Ren, even injuring him. Although Ren was wounded, and we can debate whether or not that was even a good story idea or not. It really wasn't, but they were doing some cool stuff with Finn, with the Finn character. Not to mention, he was a stormtrooper who rejected his programming and went to wind up fighting for the rebellion. So, there's some cool stuff there. There's a lot of potential in that character. Then came The Last Jedi, which kind of brought him back to I just want to run away. Which you can argue whether or not. I think a lot of people criticize that. And in terms of story, you want to see a character progress, not relapse. But in terms of that progression, in terms of having him relapse, especially after getting almost killed by Kylo Ren, I can see it. I think it was a defendable choice on Rian Johnson's part. But what isn't defensible is the right word, is when Finn he overcame all of his fears and everything. It's like I'm going out, I'm fighting with Poe and everybody else to at least slow down the First Order from taking down our last base here on whichever planet, this stupid salt planet. I don't even care what it was, to be honest, because I really don't like that movie. But anyway, Finn was going to have a great moment. He was going to sacrifice himself to take down the mini Death Star laser, blow it up, and save the day. But no, then Rian Johnson decided to have Rose slam into him and then give him a little smooch because they totally had all this chemistry going on the whole time. No, they didn't. And yeah, they stole what would have been a great moment for Finn, which then left things off for J.J. Abrams to finish the story that he started with The Rise of Skywalker. But unfortunately, for various reasons, some defensible at least, J.J. Abrams, Finn basically got sidelined. There were some more potentially interesting things going on with this character. It's like they brought back the potential Force sensitivity thing and had him meet up with a bunch of other former stormtroopers. It's like, oh, okay. So you could see where he winds up leading this group of former stormtroopers, even possibly against the First Order. Would have been a cool story. But, of course, we didn't get any of that. And a lot of that's because there were so many things that they were trying to do with Rise of Skywalker that there was just no way to fully pull it off. And, of course, Finn did wind up leading the charge against the signal beacon, essentially, on one of the Death Star destroyers, which I roll. He got a chance to do some stuff, but overall his character was very much sidelined to somebody who just screamed "Ray" a lot, and that was a thing that fans pointed out very early on, right after the movie came out. It's like what happened to Finn? He kind of became borderline useless, and yeah, he did. Now, this is where he has a point. Finn's story was never paid off. He was never the character that he could have been, that he should have been. And I don't say that because there needs to be cool black character representation in Star Wars. I don't really care about that, but Finn was a potentially cool character that they left by the wayside. Regardless of color, obviously, who cares? They just left that character hanging. And Rose, I was okay with her getting sidelined, frankly, because there's just a dumb character that was wedged in there. Frankly, I think for representation purposes. And her story just didn't make... Her story was dumb insofar as that forced romance with Finn, and then you get the woke SJW speech on Cantabite, so on and so forth. It was just a poorly written character. No shade on Kelly Marie Tran, obviously, the actress that played her. Obviously, she played what she was given and did a fine job as far as that goes. It's just the character sucked. Sorry. So I was okay with her getting sidelined. You know, Oscar Isaac, I have no idea what he is, nor do I care. So yeah, I mean, like I said, he's got a point, but he's going about it being a total whiny prick. And in Abrams' defense, which I can't believe I'm defending J.J. Abrams right now because I'm not a huge fan. In his defense, I can totally understand why he did what he did and why Finn got sidelined, because there was just so much he had to do. He had to quasi-retcon The Last Jedi and wrap up everything that he wanted to do with the stories that should have taken place over 2 movies. He had to wrap it up in 1. So, yeah, Finn didn't have a good story, but I see why it wound up turning out the way it did. If they would have just, had a plan or followed whatever plan they might have had throughout the whole series, things would have been different, but alas, here we are. Let's see here, what else? Well, obviously, cities around the country continue to burn. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I talked about that Sunday morning on the way home on a Periscope stream, which, if you want to go check that out, just go to Twitter at Fighting Void, and I'm sure you can find it there in the feed. Other than that, continue, pray, stay safe, take care of each other out there, because it's hard to predict what's going to happen over the next few weeks and months, especially as we get closer to the election. But it's probably not going to be good. One thing on the good side, the lockdowns are overall continuing to roll back. Michigan, the great Queen Whitmer, hath decreed that gyms may begin to reopen come the September 9th. So, and it's still very limited, very tightly regulated. Not a fan of that, but at least we're getting somewhere, which I think entirely has to do with the fact that the Unlock Michigan petition is almost got its goal of 500,000 signatures, and she knows it's going to go through. So she's trying to kind of nip it in the bud and be like, well, what are these people complaining about? They just can't go to see a movie. That's it. That's all they can't do. Which, of course, Gretchen, you're missing the point entirely. So if I remember correctly, one of the goals of the petition is to make sure that she can never do anything like this again. And I really hope it succeeds because, so not a fan. But I believe overall they continue to roll back around the country, in many cases very, very slowly, much like in Michigan. But you've got other places where, fortunately, DeSantis in Florida said, yeah, we're never doing that again. Never going to happen. We're not doing these kind of lockdowns for pretty much any reason ever again. Granted, if there's actually like a Black Death going on, that might be a different situation, obviously. But at least for a virus like this, yeah, not happening. So good for him. Be happy you live in Florida, where you have some sort of sane leadership that has a pair. And continue to pray for those of us who have leaders that do not have any common sense or a pair. By which I mean guts in Whitmer's case, because I would expect her to have a physical pair. That'd be, well, these days I guess it wouldn't be that strange now, would it? Who knows how Governor Rumbridge identifies behind. Anyway, I don't want to even go there. So I'd say I think we're just about done with COVID, at least for now. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to pull second or third wave nonsense coming in the fall as we hit allergy / actual cold flu pneumonia season. They'll probably try to pull something, but I don't know if it's. I don't know how effective it's going to be because they milked this. They milked this so hard this time around, and obviously manipulated it. Obviously lied. I mean, come on, the protests / riots going on all over the country. They won't say anything about that, but man, some people get together in a bar or at a church or at a sports stadium. They're all clutching pearls, lighting their hair on fire. I don't know how many people are going to have the patience for another round of lockdowns. I really don't see it happening. Not so severely. They'll push to try to make masks permanent. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. Especially if Biden wins. If Biden wins, they're definitely going to try to make masks permanent. I can almost guarantee it. But let's hope he doesn't, because boy, that'd be stupid. Anyway, I think that about wraps it up. I'll continue to broadcast, do Periscope streams in the mornings as I'm able / motivated. I'll continue to do these at 2 a.m. Monday mornings. And that should go on for another definitely 3, probably 4, possibly 5 weeks. Possibly 5. We'll see. And then I'm going to be shortly after that, I'll be out of town for a couple of weeks, doing some other stuff for work. But beginning of November, we should start getting into more of the old regular schedule, and I'll be having guests and interviewing, and that'll be great because I'm looking forward to it. I miss doing it, but you can only do so much with whatever time you got. So pray, stay safe, and until I see you next time, keep fighting the good fight.